Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Fulham podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network, bringing you the latest news and views from across the Premier League and women's football too. My name is Gavin Ruffle, and today is our crossover edition of the podcast, and with Fulham playing host to Spurs this weekend, it's my delight, it's my pleasure to introduce my guest at this time. It's Joe from the Daily Spurs podcast. How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm good, thank you, mate. I'm good. I also like to apologise because I've put Gav under loads of pressure by changing the times and then saying that, like, oh, I've got a meeting and stuff. So Gav is holding it all together with consummate professionalism while I'm kind of buzzing around. So thank you, mate. I do appreciate it.
No worries at all. And obviously it helps that we've had one or two tech issues as well just before coming on to this podcast. So it always happens when you're in a bit of a rush, doesn't it? But hey, we'll crack on and we'll start the chat with Spurs. So obviously Spurs, they got a massive game tonight, having their second leg of the Europa League tie. Home to AZ Alkmaar, 1-0 deficit after the first leg. I mean, you said it was a big game. Just how important is it in the context of the season then?
It's everything to Tottenham right now. So basically, I mean, everybody knows this, it's well publicised and a lot of people have taken the mickey. But Ange Postecoglou kind of staked everything this season. It's quite clever. Early on, about 6 months ago, when things were going badly, he went, look, I always win a trophy in my second season. And we're like, well, that's quite clever because you've bought yourself another few months because FA Cup third round hadn't even happened then, stuff like that. Obviously, Spurs got to the League Cup semi-final, absolutely humbled by Liverpool. Then knocked out of the FA Cup in the fourth round by Villa a few days later. Fourth round, one of them. So basically exiting both domestic cup competitions in 4 days in quick succession. So everything was down to the Europa League. Spurs went through in the automatic qualification, part of that top 8 in the Europa League. Obviously, AZ Alkmaar, favourable draw. Felt like a favourable side of the draw for Spurs as well. But as you say, lost 1-0 in that first leg and now needing to go away to Holland and win. Feels like Spurs comfortably the better side, could easily put in the performance. But who knows? Tottenham are very flat at the moment and Ange's out of excuses. He's been talking about injuries for 3 months. Injury crisis is over. Like it's an embarrassment of riches. Some seriously good players available to start and on the bench. So go out tonight. And as far as I'm concerned, that's it for grumpy old Ange.
Do you genuinely think that? Do you think if they do exit tonight, then they'll pull the plug on him or they'll give him to the end of the season? How do you see it going?
I don't think he will go, but I do think he should go. It's so harsh because we're talking about someone losing their jobs. That being said, as a football manager, it's the best job in the world because you do badly get fired and they pay you out. But yeah, I don't think he's the right man for the job. We've been very flat. Even when he's kind of tried to adapt his tactics to be a bit more pragmatic, it looks a bit naive. My thing with Postecoglou is he's only ever played one way, and that's fine because it's just a fact about kind of the SPL, for example. There are 2 good teams consistently. And then you've got Aberdeen and stuff and Hearts who are in and about. But some of the teams in that division are League One standard. And you can just fly at people every week. Can't do that in the Premier League because there's probably 17 good teams. So it's just a completely different approach to management. Who knows? Get knocked out tonight, and then if Spurs go on an amazing run and look great towards the end of the season, that's something else. But I think, yeah, if we get knocked out tonight, barring something spectacular, I don't think he'll be Tottenham's manager come August.
I just want to pick up on something you said earlier about his comments earlier in the season. I know he was asked this in the press conference as well about what he said about I always win things in my second season, and he kind of flat batted that, didn't he? Do you think deep down he kind of regrets those comments?
I think there's always an element. Every football manager has an ego, right? And I think he probably believes it. I think he probably believes that. And I also do think there was an element of buying himself time. And look, he's kind of, he knows it's sort of flush or bust for him right now because either, yeah, he wins the Europa League and he looks like a genius and he was right because he called it. But if it goes wrong, he gets paid out. And yeah, he'll probably have to take a step down in terms of profile of club where he goes next. But maybe he'll be at a club that don't have that expectation to kind of end a long wait for silverware. So yeah, I think he bought himself some time at a difficult point in the season.
Yeah, and it's not just the manager who's under pressure. There's a lot of scrutiny about the ownership. We've seen protests recently against Daniel Levy. I think it's before the Man United game, wasn't it? What's your kind of take on that? Where do you sit on that fence?
Do you know what? Like, I think you can't doubt the investment that's been made in the club recently. So, I mean, I can't remember what the exact stats are, but I think Bournemouth are kind of the team that Spurs fans compare us to, particularly given that kind of we cover Iriola to quite a great extent. And I think it's something like our net spend is about 200 million in the same time that theirs is about 5 million. Don't quote me on that, but I know it far outstrips theirs. And Bournemouth are a better team. And both managers came in at approximately the same time last season. And yeah, I just think there has been investment recently from the ownership, to be fair. I think what there has been is an incoherent transfer policy and an incoherent managerial policy. So I think Spurs have just kind of, obviously, we did the thing with Pochettino, the project manager, did a great job, didn't get any money for 5 transfer windows in a row. Unsurprisingly, things went a little bit wrong. That squad that Pochettino had at the end, I know it got to the Champions League final, but that really covered up a whole load of problems that team had. Then there was finally a bit of investment, but then Mourinho, Conte, Nuno was kind of 7th pick, I believe, at that point. And it's just, it has been so horribly incoherent. I think kind of Spurs look at teams like Brighton or Brentford and just think we want a manager in there, ownership in there for the long term that has a 20-year plan that they won't deviate from if things go wrong.
Yeah, and it has been a difficult season for Spurs. The Europa League is the last ray of hope. You're not where you want to be in the league. So you would say the negatives outweigh the positives, but what for you have been the positives, if there have indeed been any?
There's some really exciting players. In the Spurs team. Dejan Kulusevski's had a great season. Pedro Porro, by and large, has had a great season. Both of those two players, their form has gone off a cliff in the last couple of weeks. That is because I'm not surprised they're tired, because they've been carrying Spurs on their backs between the two of them for the best part of 6 months. They've played a ton of football. They've both stayed fit when other players haven't. They now look knackered, but they've played really well. If we can get them both to stay, great semi-senior players that we can kind of build a future on. There's some really exciting young players. Lucas Bergval's kind of really grown into that kind of box-to-box midfield role. Can do a bit of everything. Creative, can move with the ball, can pick a pass, not afraid to kind of chuck a boot in or indeed an elbow sometimes, like as and when he wants. Doesn't look like the type, because he kind of looks like butter wouldn't melt, little kind of blonde lad from a sort of Milky Bar advert in the late 90s, but that is not his personality at all. And I think Archie Gray has been absolutely outstanding. So he's played at right back, he's played predominantly at centre back. He wants to play central midfield, but such a good player can play almost anywhere. And if we can keep hold of him, keep hold of Bergval, then I think there's the foundations for a very, very good team in there.
Yeah. And one player you didn't actually mention, who I feel like it's been a bit of a breakthrough season. He's been at Spurs for a while, but it just hasn't happened for him. I don't think he was actually signed by the manager at the time. And that's Jed Spence. I think due to injury to Doggy, he's found his place in the team. He's naturally a right back, but he's played a lot on the left side, hasn't he? So what do you think the difference has been for him this season? Why we're suddenly seeing him flourish?
Do you know what? So Jed Spence is an interesting player. So came in under Conte, having been in the championship team of the season. He was at Borough, but he was on loan at Forest, the Forest team that got promoted. Spurs bought him. He turned up, and Antonio Conte said, to paraphrase, on a pre-season tour, basically, I don't want him. Like, I've seen him in training, and I don't think he's good enough. Now, Conte was obviously wrong, and that seems like a pretty irresponsible thing to say to, I think he was 19 or 20 at the time. Pretty dismissive, unpleasant thing to say, but that is Antonio Conte, as we've kind of all come to learn. Look, I think there was an issue initially with his work ethic. He went on loan to Leeds, had a knee injury there, so not much happened for him. But then he went to Genoa in Italy, and actually he did really, really well there, and kind of found himself playing at the San Siro and stuff. And there's been some really good interviews with him where he was kind of like, oh yeah, this is what I want. Like, but at the end of the day, I'm on loan, but I want to play in stadiums like this. I want to play against the best players in the world. I want to play against legendary clubs. And he realised he was one of those footballers, and I think it's natural, got his big move, thought that was it. But he doesn't realise, no, that's just the beginning. You've actually got to work so hard. And I think he's really turned himself around in terms of attitude. I think he's quite a quiet, sort of introverted lad as well. So it's taken him a little while, I think, to settle in. But yeah, as you said, he played left back, been absolutely outstanding. Coming at right back recently, he probably will be starting at right back for the next few weeks because Porro's fitness, Porro's just knackered. He's played pretty much every second for Spurs and he just is wrecked at this point. You can see it in his football. He looks like he's making mistakes, which kind of isn't like him. Yeah, he's been absolutely outstanding. And obviously, this you're not going to care about this in the slightest, but it kind of makes me think, well, I've seen him play left back. Is that the England's left back issue solved? But that's always in the back of my mind somewhere.
Yeah, definitely something to look at in the future, especially now with Lewis Hall injured as far as England are concerned. So there's a deep dive into Spurs. In the next part, we'll lift the mood. But before we do that, let me just mention our sponsors. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. So, Joe, let's lift your spirits a bit then. Let's get away from the negativity of all things Spurs. And I've actually devised a bit of a quiz for you. It's related to Fulham and to Spurs.
Yep.
And it's in the Premier League era. The last time I did this, it didn't work so well because the people I were quizzing were born in about 2003. So they didn't have a clue who half the players were on about. But I think you're a similar age demographic to me. So I think this should work hopefully a little bit better. So I've got just a few questions to say on all things Fulham Spurs. So we'll start straight away. I'll give you a minute to answer this one. So there have been 24 players to have played for Spurs and Fulham in the Premier League. They played at least one game for both of those sides. So in a minute, can you name as many as possible?
So, Dimitar Berbatov, Steed Malbrank,
Yep.
Paul Konchesky.
Yep.
Who else? Who else played? Moussa Dembele. Oh my God, who else? Clint Dempsey.
Yep.
Who else has been at both clubs? Let me think. My brain is rattling through faces of early noughties footballers now. Oh my God, who else? Right, so forwards. Let me think. Is that it? Is that me out? Scott Parker? No. Yeah. Scott Parker. Yep. Scott Parker. Yep. Obviously managed both. No, managed Fulham. Played at Spurs. But yeah, right. I think that might be it.
10 seconds if you can get any more.
Oh, who else? Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
That's me out.
I'll put you out of your misery. Some are obvious, some are less so. So I'll give you the ones you didn't get. Michael Brown, so that's gone back early 2000s. You've got Simon Davis, Sean Davis, Ida Johnson, who briefly played for both clubs, Lewis Holtby, Casey Keller, Stephen Kelly, Danny Murphy, Josh Onomer, Wayne Routledge, Louis Sahar, Ryan Sessegnon, a bit more recent, Manos Solomon, Paul Stalteri, Adel Tarat, Carlos Vinicius, and Bobby Zamora.
Do you know what? I should have done better with all of those. The only one that still, even though you've just said it, my brain has no memory of is Idiger Johnson. I've got no memory of him at Fulham whatsoever.
Yeah, he might have scored once, I think. I'm not sure if he scored for Spurs. I think he scored in a cup tie against Fulham, actually. I think that might have been his only goal.
I should have done better there.
Next question. So Spurs' first meeting with Fulham in the Premier League was in December 2001. Who was the Spurs manager at the time?
Right. So this is a very dark period for Spurs. So I think we've just come off the back of George Graham, and I think this is probably Christian Gross.
No, it's actually Glenn Hoddle. Glenn Hoddle was in charge at that time. So this is also related to that game. So Spurs won that game 4-0. Can you tell me any of the goal scorers?
2001. So is Teddy Sheringham back at Spurs? That's the question. Has Teddy Sheringham? Potentially Teddy Sheringham. No. Let me think. So This is a hard period. Darren Anderton?
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, sick note. Who else would it have been? 2001. This is a bad, like I say, this is a bad period for Spurs. I'm really trying to remember my Football Manager team from this period.
There are two forwards and one winger.
Winger might be Rule Fox.
Oh,
No, Rule's already gone by that point.
Up?
I give up, mate. That's it.
So the winger who played for both clubs was Simon Davis, and then
Digger.
And the two forwards, Les Ferdinand, which was actually a landmark goal because that was the 10,000th goal in the Premier League Premiership as it was back then, and the other one was the Ukrainian striker Sergei Rebrov.
Sergei Rebrov, mate. Yep. So basically, we bought Sergei Rebrov because he played up front with Andrei Shevchenko for Dynamo Kiev, and Shevchenko gone to Milan was unbelievable. So we bought his strike partner, like, well, this guy's obviously just as good. No, turns out that Shevchenko was the one who was really carrying the load in that Dynamo Kiev team.
He was okay for a month or two anyway. Next question. These sides have met 35 times in the Premier League. How many of those games have Spurs won?
I would say 24.
Ooh, you've gone high there. No, the answer is 19. So Spurs, 19 wins, Fulham 8, and there have been 8 draws. Across those games, which player has scored the most individual goals?
So it's from 2001 onwards. So it's going to be someone like Gareth Bale, maybe Jermaine Defoe.
Harry Kane with 8 goals. Oh. Next question. As we know, Moussa Dembele played for both clubs. He was adored by both sets of fans, wasn't he? But who did he score more league goals for?
I reckon Fulham. He barely scored for Spurs.
Yeah, I think when he signed for Fulham, he played a more advanced role. Well, initially when Mark Hughes brought him in, but then he dropped back. But he actually scored more goals for Spurs. He's played a lot more games for Spurs. 5 goals for Fulham and 7 goals for Spurs.
Mate, can I just say as well, you're like, what a footballer.
Oh, unbelievable. I think everyone who played with him says he was like the best player they've ever played with, isn't he? He was a real player. Yeah, he just used to glide past players with ease.
This is it. And he was in a really decent Spurs side that under Pochettino, and everybody like Harry Kane's son, like there's all those kind of videos that went viral and whatever on Insta, just like, yeah, Dembele's the best player in the team.
As we know, Ida Good-Johnson played briefly for both clubs.
Legend.
His most decorated spell in London was with Chelsea. How many league titles did he win when he was at Stamford Bridge?
Oh, Fulham legend, Ida Good-Johnson. He was there just as Abramovich bought the club, but then obviously played early days under Mourinho. I reckon 3?
2. So I think it was back-to-back season, 2004-05 and 2005-06.
That ridiculous Chelsea team that couldn't be beaten.
So which former manager has taken charge of both Spurs and Fulham in the Premier League?
Oh, easy, mate. Martin Jol.
There we go. We're going
hero.
Right.
What a hero.
Yeah. There's a well-known chant about a former Fulham and Spurs man. All I need you to do is finish the lyrics for me. When you're sat in Rosette.
Oh, when you're sat in Rosette, it's Zamora.
Yeah, exactly. When you're sat in Rosette and the ball hits your head, that's Zamora. And the final question, we'll finish with an easy one. Oh, I think it's an easy one. Who scored the goals in the meeting between the two sides earlier in the season?
Oh, blimey, I can't even remember this game. I can't remember the game or the score. That's bad, isn't it? Sorry, I was doing my research for this on the train home last night. Let me think. What was the score? Can you remind me of the score?
I can't tell you that.
You can't tell me that. Okay, I'm going to say... let me think. Alex Iwobi and Dejan Kulusevski.
No, that's incredibly bad. It was Brennan Johnson and Tom Kearney. And if you can remember, Tom Kearney was actually sent off as well late on in the game.
I can't.
You don't remember it. You don't remember it.
I cannot remember this game at all. That's the one
thing
I didn't
think of. Spurs season, didn't it? Not very memorable,
mate. Like in all honesty, yes. There's so much. Basically, I got a telly put in my kitchen. I was like, I'm gonna spend a bit of money on that because I'm gonna watch football, right? And literally, the amount of Spurs games that have passed my glazed eyes in the last 6 months without anything happening of note.
Well, that was a mediocre effort in that quiz, if I do say so myself. So in the last part, we will briefly look ahead to this game as Fulham go head to head with Spurs, looking to continue their march towards Europe, and Spurs look to arrest their slide in the league.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
So, Joe, we know Spurs have a big game tonight in the Europa League. Are you expecting several changes for the Fulham game, regardless of how it goes in the Europa League?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we're at the stage now where we can rotate because the injury crisis is over. So a lot of players back. I mean, even long-term absentees like Christian Romero. So, yeah, we might see a bit of rotation. But at the end of the day, Fulham are a decent side away. London derby, you have to play a decent side.
Are you slightly concerned about the approach in the league for the remainder of the season? Or do you feel if Ange's still in the job, then there is extra motivation to end the season strong? And I know they are a bit far off top half, but is that still a goal?
Well, this is it. I mean, look, like 8th isn't out of reach, which is going to be Conference League this season. So that's definitely not out of reach if we put together a consistent run of form, which we should do. And bear in mind, it's only going to be league games and a Europa League game should we get through every couple of weeks or every 3-4 weeks as you get deeper into the competition. So I don't think we can kind of throw the league at this point. I think we need to be going as hard as we can in both competitions.
And where do you see the strengths, the problem areas from the Fulham team that can maybe hurt Spurs?
Obviously, Iwobi's had an outstanding season. I think the biggest problem that Spurs have is when we play teams that sit back against us and we find it hard to break down and we get hit on the counter. I don't actually expect Fulham to do that. I think you might bring the game to us a little bit. To be honest with you, I think the thing as well that kind of gives me heart, Tottenham's away form's very good and Fulham's home form's pretty bad. So this is the problem. And I think the issue that Fulham have had this season is dropping points against teams in the bottom half at home. And obviously, Spurs are one of them. So I do actually, if this was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I think I would have less hope. But it's a very hard one to call, kind of given, the patchy form of both teams.
No, you're absolutely spot on in what you say there. Fulham's form at home has certainly been indifferent. Away from home, they've been a lot more comfortable, even despite that defeat later on against Brighton. And just finally then, how do you see it going? What's your score prediction for the game?
I hate to go against Spurs. 2-2. 2-2.
Ooh, entertaining game then.
Yeah, how about yourself?
I think because Spurs, the focus is going to be on Europe. I think it's probably a good time to play them. So I'm going to go for Fulham to nick it. But I think it's going to be an entertaining, free-flowing game. We know how Ange sets up. And Fulham, if they want to strive for Europe, then it's a game they must win. And some of their performances recently have been a bit below par, maybe, especially at home. But hopefully atmosphere is good and they're ready to go, raring to go for this one. But yeah, let's hope for an entertaining game. That'll just about do it for today's crossover episode with Joe from the Daily Spurs podcast. Be sure to listen out to their podcast. Continue to listen to the Daily Fulham podcast, and we'll catch you all next time.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.